Anything who knows anything about history knows these two facts. Nazis are bad, and history is complicated. In fact, the second one is so true that we have to refine history to just basic things, just the big events, the wars, the inventions, that we lose the personal stories. We lose the things about it that we only know ourselves, or so we think. Because I know that within each of us, we have one of the greatest archives of our own personal history, and that is in our language. The way we speak, be it through the words we choose or how we say it, tells so much about what we've done, and it evolves with us. It is our personal tool, and it's very versatile, and it's our personal story. And there will be people that just want to use language to create a hierarchy, to put people down, to constantly correct your grammar and change your if I was to if I were. But those people are missing the point of language. Language is for communication, not for degradation. And we need to treat it as such. We need to look at language as it is, a complex culmination of cultures and perspectives that together build our unique view of the world. Now, like most or every person, depending on who you ask, I was born without the ability to talk. But that didn't deter me from trying to learn. From my earliest goo goo gaga to my ability to speak in complete sentences, wow, I was able to realize that my language was powerful. I didn't know what the words meant, but I did know that they gave me some unique abilities. I could go and impress my teachers, or could go to my parents and demand cookies. Now, I grew up in the town of Pearl River, New York. It's a rather small and uniform town. Small and uniform is a bit of an understatement. There are probably about 60 people in my elementary school class, and there was 98% white, 90% Irish, and 100% New Yorker. So as you can imagine, we all grew up speaking in a particular way. Although you can't expect it now, I said such wonderful things as, I'm Sam Clark and I want to be a lawyer. Or, I saw what you're doing over there. And that was just natural to me. And you never expect it now with the way that I speak. And also, with its small, compact uniformity, what was happening was any word that we learned would pass through our culture. Something from the TV or from a sibling would catch like a wildfire, and soon everyone would know it. We'd evolve, sure, but we'd remain compact. It wouldn't change too much. So it wasn't until about the 3rd grade when I realized that my language was different than other people's. See, in elementary school, I had a terrible secret that I couldn't tell anyone. I enjoyed school. And I wanted to keep this as secret as I could because that was like social ostracism and such. But when I was at home, I would go and I would look at my brother's spelling lists, and he was 2 grades older, but I really enjoyed trying to learn that and look at the words there. So I learned vocabulary like abundance or mediocre, while my friends were learning things like pwned or swag. And I couldn't keep up with that. So I had to choose, and I chose the complex, more traditional vocabulary. This somewhat isolated me from my peers, but made me graceful among people older than me. So my friends became in the grade or 2 above. So the way I was speaking my language was determining who I was hanging out with, and essentially directing me on different courses in my life. But more was yet to come. You see, I moved to the town, South Pasadena, California, which you all probably know pretty well, and if you don't, get out from under the rock you're living in. So South Pasadena is very different from New York, or Pearl River, New York, because it's so much more diverse. And also, the language has so many more different things that you wouldn't expect. So my first experience with how different the language was something simple, something most people don't even notice every day, but it's something that happens all the time. I was tired, and my family, we had just moved, our kitchen wasn't working, and we wanted to order a pizza, right, from a store. And New York pizza is better than California pizza. I'm sorry for everyone who thinks otherwise. You got to go to New York. Anywho, we called and said, we'd like a pie. And they said, we're not a bakery. We were very surprised because in New York, pie was what you used for pizza, a pizza pie. But in California, it's pizza. For some reason, one part that was very essential to me growing up in New York, something like a simple term that I could use all the time, was powerless here. It didn't connect with the people I was speaking to. But I had an important thing, a memento, an artifact from my past culture. No one else here knew the word pie in that sense. But it told my story, the little bit of me that lived in New York for a little bit, the part of me that experienced that culture instead of this one. But there was something more interesting in South Pasadena to me. Not the little things, but the big things. Different languages. In New York, Pearl River, we only spoke English. But here, Spanish, Italian, French, Mandarin, German, you name it, they all seem to be spoken. I could talk to someone, and one of my friends, and they could turn around and speak in fluent German to their parents. And this gave them the ability to talk to groups of people who I didn't necessarily know and I didn't necessarily be able to communicate with. I was isolated because of the language barrier. Even if they also spoke English, the other language, the foreign language, reached them on a different level. And I couldn't necessarily do that. But I was more interested in how it affected how we spoke English, because that was a shared language between us. So one time, I was with my friends and I was studying for the SAT, like people who like school do. Yes, we study the SAT for fun. So anyway, I was with my friends and I needed a word that meant annoying, but it was an SAT vocabulary word. So I asked around and got some responses. Fastidious, enervating, peevish, all very different. But yet, where they came from was more interesting. See, 9 times out of 10, the Spanish speaker would choose fastidious, because it sounds like fastidiar, which is a word in Spanish that means to annoy. For French, enervating would be the word chosen for the same reason. And peevish came from one of my friends who liked reading more archaic English texts. And because of that, they used that word, whereas other people didn't. Me? I chose the word vexatious. Not because of a language I knew, not because of anything like that, but because of a video game in which there was an enemy called the Vex, and vexatious sounded like that. So we're all bringing in parts of our culture that we don't necessarily think about. We didn't learn these words in the language from studying English over and over again. We learned it from the random normal experiences in life. And we brought in those little bits of our culture. And this was a very interesting thing because it gave us access to some new ideas that we didn't necessarily know before. Now, at this point, I'd like to say I'm multilingual. I'd like to say I can speak many languages, but that would only include English, sarcasm, Java, Pig Latin, maybe a little bit of Spanish. But just because I'm refined to one language doesn't mean I'm refined to one way of speaking, because there are some hidden languages. I can definitely maneuver how I speak because I'm proficient with English. I've known it for a long time and I've communicated with different people. I have a language I speak around friends, which is colloquial and sarcastic. I have one around strangers, which is more nonchalant, but still formal. So I'm presentable, but don't necessarily scare them away. I have one I use around the parents of my friends, which is very pedantic and sounds intellectual, because typically it impresses them. And I have one I use in my essay, which is flowery and poetic, and half the times I don't even know what I'm saying. But it seems to be impressive, so I typically stick with it. Now, what's perhaps more interesting is that this allows me to access different subsets. I might not be able to access the subsets of people and languages that foreign languages do, but I have an ability to talk to people in a different way that shows a different tone. The difference between a hi and a hello may be small, but it conveys a lot in many things, such as formality and attitude. So let's take a scientist and a gamer, who are two subgroups of people that obviously have their own type of way of talking. That way of talking is, we have our perspectives on it, and being able to talk in that manner may allow us to communicate with them. Some people know it, other people don't. And because of that, the way that we communicate can be isolated or connected. Now, they may look like this to people who don't understand it. And to people who do understand it, you're probably laughing at those because those are not at all what they actually sound like. But you can change it to that because you can learn the way that they speak. And it's somewhat a thing of respect as well. Because if you're reaching someone on their own level, on the level that they understand, you're connecting with them in a more deeper, intrinsic way. And this is a very important thing. So at this point, I'd like to get to a problem with this, which is assumptions. So there are a lot of things to do with assumptions that language brings up. If language is your story, and you use it to communicate with people, does language define who you are? Does it define your legacy? Does it define everything about you? Well, let's start with me and some assumptions people have on myself. 1, people seem to think I'm intellectual. Maybe it's the fact I'm at a TED Talk or the words I'm using, but people just seem to think I'm always sounding like I'm debating a political issue. 2, I'm socially competent, but I'm no fun at parties. I don't cuss. I don't make any jokes that my peers tend to like, and I definitely don't laugh at their jokes because I don't find them funny. But at least I can talk to people. At least I can talk to people and communicate. 3 is that I'm good with adults, but terrible with children. I can be graceful when talking with old people, but then when I'm talking with kids, I'm like, hey, baby, don't do that. And the baby doesn't understand because, it's a baby. And other people can go down to this language that they're talking with the dog. They're like, who's the good baby? Who's the good baby? But I don't even know how to do that. You see, it sounds like I'm talking to a dog. So because of that, I'm isolated in that sense, and I can't really communicate with children. 4, I don't quite understand modern culture. I sound like I'm talking from a Tolkien book. I mean, I can know the words and the phrases, and I can string them together and say such things as, I'd like to get lit with my woke fam. Or maybe it's woke with my lit fam. The point is I don't really know. It's something I'm not connected with. All of these are 100% true. But if I so choose, they're also 100% wrong. You see, language gives us the ability to change things. If your language is your story, it's a whole book, an encyclopedia of everything that you've ever learned and experienced. But when you speak, you only show the page that you're on. You lift it up and you show it as you choose to. What language gives you is the ability to flip back and forth to the things you've highlighted before, to the footnotes you thought you'd never use. And this gives you the ability to communicate in multiple ways. So yes, I can be that one way if I speak in the way I normally speak. But I can change it. And I can change it to the situation so that I better interact and better communicate my ideas. The very important thing is that it's like being a chameleon. And there's this negative connotation with being a chameleon that it's fake, that you're not actually who you are, that you're just shifting between the situation. But what I see from a chameleon is that it's always the same creature, the same thing that's just changing how it expresses itself to the outside world. And this means that we should all desire to be like that, because this allows us to fit into situations better. We're still ourselves. We still have our story, but we can flip back and forth and show what we want of it based on the situation. So what are we going to do about this? There are assumptions out there, and we have this powerful tool of language. Well, my philosophy is simple and in a couple steps. First is that your language is your story. And that's a very important fact that you should never forget. It's ever evolving, sure. You're adding new things, and other people can influence it. But you get to choose what you add, what you highlight, what you lock away for later, because it's expressing your ideas. However you want to do it is encompassed within your language. It's not the definition, but it's a reflection of what you like to show. 2, know the right way to speak language, and then forget it, because your way is the right way. You can know the correct things about grammar, you can know the little tidbits, and you can know all the ways that you learn, and that's great for learning how to speak originally. But sometimes to communicate, you need to speak differently, abnormally. You need to kind of speak from your heart, and that might not follow the typical conventions. Language is for communication, so we should communicate in the best way we can. If that's in a way that sounds completely random to someone else, but makes sense to the target you're trying to hit, then that is how you should speak. 3 is that you may only have 1 or 2, a couple languages, but you have infinite ways to speak. Your speech is powered by everything that you've known, and you have that book that you can flip back between. So all these words that you learn in new situations or you have learned in the past are your words. You can pick them up and you can spin them around, use them in whatever manner you choose. Don't worry about a word not being like you. People are often terrified that, oh, if I sound this, I sound fake. After using it a couple times, you'll realize if that's the case. And if it is, you can shelve it. Only use it when you really need it. If it's not, great. It becomes a part of you. So with that, I'd like to leave with a simple idea. Speak what you know, speak what you feel, and speak what is relevant to you. Because all of that is very powerful and very important. Language is one of the greatest tools. It contains our history of whatever we've interacted with and the story that we would like to write as we move forward. And there are thousands of people, millions perhaps, who would like to push that down, who would like to confine you to some hierarchy, to make fun of your accent, or to correct your grammar. But to them, I say this: don't worry, we all speak correct. Thank you.